Hi, everybody. Dacob here. Welcome back to the Fragrant Bunker. I'm so excited to re-review Egoiste by Chanel, the Eau de Toilette concentration. Why do I say re-review? Well, since the Chanel house, fragrance house, at least when it comes to fragrances, the fragrance house of Chanel is my favorite of them all. And I'm not sponsored. I bought this myself, okay? But every time I have this tradition, every time I open a new batch of one of my favorite perfumes, I re-review them. I just touch base on the current formulation, the current batch, how does it smell, the current price category, just keeping it up to date because I'm thinking to myself, I've been on YouTube for a long time, albeit not with this fragrance channel. I have several other channels. By the way, go subscribe also to my main Super Dacob channel, to my Pop Culture Totally Dacob channel, and of course, while you're at it, why not here as well, my perfume channel, Essentially Dacob. But I have reviewed before I had a perfume channel on my main Super Dacob channel already like 10 years ago, Egoiste Eau de Toilette. And then I have revisited it around about 2022. Now, 3 years later, it's time to give it another go. I have batch code 1303. They're always etched there at the bottom. Can you see it? It's right down there. And then also the batch codes are on the packaging down here, also etched in there. This is not the batch code. This is the product number. But right here, you have that little, there you have it nicely. 1303. This is the freshest batch I could find from my local Chanel beauty boutique. They don't have many of these. Usually they keep their Bleu de Chanel, their Allure pour Homme, Platinum Egoiste as well. They're kind of their bestsellers. They kind of put them all very visible. Egoiste is usually hiding, and then when you want it, they kind of go to a whole other separate part of the beauty boutique where in a drawer they keep these. They are kind of like a special treat. I'm not saying that they have become an exclusive to boutique fragrance yet. The original Egoiste Eau de Toilette. But, it is one of those connoisseur type of Chanel for men targeted fragrances, just like Anteus is as well as Pour Monsieur Eau de Toilette, which unfortunately in the Eau de Toilette concentration has been discontinued in some countries. The United States of America does not. Chanel does not distribute the Eau de Toilette of Pour Monsieur, but the Eau de Parfum they do. In Europe, you can find both concentrations. Now, Egoiste, thankfully, is still available in the States, but only as a 100 milliliter bottle. They have kind of repackaged these years ago. They were available as a 50 ml and then as a 100 ml. There was a time when they also had splash bottles. There was a 200 milliliter bottle of this. I think even a 300 or 250 ml splash bottles. The lids had that wooden impression on them because Egoiste, before it was Egoiste, before it was released in 1990, it was called Bois Noir, and it was only exclusive to Chanel boutiques. It was kind of like a trial run made for Mr. Wertheimer by Jacques Polge because he wanted something that was similar to him to Bois des Îles, which is Ernest Beau's masterpiece from the 20s for Chanel, which is still available as Les Exclusifs, by the way. Sandalwood Dream from the 20s with a lot of aldehydes, creating something more modern for the late 80s, which would be Bois Noir, which was then tested, trial run in European boutiques, and then taken off the market to then launch it worldwide, first in Europe and then in the States as Egoiste. Now, originally, the splash bottles had this structure where the lid was a little bit tighter than the bottle, and you would screw off the lid, and it would be a splash bottle. The spray bottles were kind of elongated in one piece. There was no step between the lid and the bottle. They were a little bit thinner, slimmer, taller, and the lid would have the same, length, width as the bottle, and it would have all of the wood carvings into kind of an impression of wood texture in the plastic. Now they have switched this is still plastic, although it does feel kind of cold to the touch. I wonder if they have like a thin layer of metal on top covering the plastic. I think it's still plastic, but it's hefty. The sprayer is all that satiny black metal. And let's spray it on. My God, I love this perfume so much. It is, look, it's beautiful. Buy it. That's what I gotta say. Oh my God, it is so beautiful. You know, my last update video review of this one was in, like I said, 2022. That batch, you can go check out that video. It is, I remember it being smokier, kind of like a leather smoky accord. Right now, the current version is, it smells really close to the original from the 90s. Again, it is dusty, invigorating, spicy, beautiful sandalwood accord in there. The aldehydes are sparkling. This one smells more medicinal, which I love. I love when a Chanel Eau de Toilette, and Eau de Toilette concentrations by Chanel are my favorites. I love when a Chanel Eau de Toilette goes into that clinical smell that only Chanel knows how to do. Oh my God, this is beautiful. Let's read what the current Chanel website as of 2025. So I am filming this in the second half of 2025. We're going to get to the prices in 2025. Also interesting to see how these prices change throughout the years. They never go down. They keep going up. The product information that Chanel gives us, and by the way, everything I say in this video is for entertainment purposes only, not rooted in truths or facts. Everything's alleged and just my opinion. Subscribe while you're at it and thumb up the video. Okay, and thank you so much for being here. The description as per the Chanel website, and I'm reading to you directly from their website. Let's see what they have to say. So Chanel says, for the product description, oh, this is so beautiful. It goes, oh man, sublime. It's not sweet at all, but it has that sandalwood warmth. Okay, product description, independent and elusive, utterly fascinating, a bold and rich woody fragrance for the man whose power of seduction lies in his strong character, in a masculine bottle with clean, sharp lines. Now, the original first early 90s video ad campaign, I think was by Mr. Good, was created. The video was filmed in the south of France in this building, this white building with many different openable windows, and these women were opening these windows and they were like screaming "Egoiste, Egoiste" from each window of this building, except one room, one apartment was shut closed, and that's where he was the egoist, the guy who had an affair with each one of these ladies in this building, and they were all obsessed with him. They all wanted him with all their might, like they would dream of him. It was just the desire and the carnal craving of him was just beyond that drove them crazy. They had to kind of start screaming his name out of their windows because he was not, by this time, he has had an affair with every lady in the building, and they all found out from each other that he was kind of playing each and every one of them, and he's living in the center heart of that building, but now that they've all figured it out, he's kind of in hiding, and they're all calling him an egoist. Man, what a beautiful advertisement. Those were the days when there was still artistry in perfume advertisements, whether they be photographic for fashion magazines or whether they be film, video form. Now, they do not talk about the seduction lies in his strong character. I would have added, if I were Chanel, I would have been a little bit more honest, a little bit more cheeky. I would have thrown in something about egotism in it, for a man who loves himself above anything else, that little, snarky remark, because that's the concept. I mean, you call your perfume Egoiste. So there's a reason for that. It's a self-love that is almost a little bit sickly, clinical, dare I say, medicinal. It's as though now it is out in the open that this egotistical man is an egotist. So that means that all of these ladies know. So it's almost as if we have diagnosed him. He has clinically been diagnosed by the masses, okay? Diagnosed by popular opinion. Hence why I feel the fact that this has that clinical, medicinal touch to it in its notes is so beautiful. It fits this poetic concept of an egotistical dude, you know what I mean? I love this perfume so much. So anyway, composition, a unique woody, spicy, ambery composition with an intense personality, Chanel states on their website, lively, fresh top notes of mandarin and coriander, subtly spiced, blend into the warm and enveloping notes of Damascus rose. The richness of sandalwood is underlined by vanilla and ambrette seed for a sensual trail. We also see muskmallow and ambrette in a very special Les Exclusives fragrance, number 18, which symbolizes the address in the center of Paris, where Chanel at Place Vendôme has their joaillerie boutique, their fine jewelry and high-end jewelry boutique. So that perfume is supposed to smell of Place Vendôme. Place Vendôme, which, by the way, has the shape of this shape. And this shape is also the shape chosen for Chanel No. 5's lid. Chanel No. 5's lid is, again, brought back in the shape of our Egoiste bottle. So everything comes full circle within Chanel. I love when they have these connections of shape, design, architecture. And the ambrette seed and the muskmallow, which are very present in abundance in number 18, which has, as a Les Exclusives, currently available only as an eau de parfum, which has in its heart the idea of self-manufactured brandy, a distilled brandy and a potpourri smell made by Chanel for Chanel, especially for that perfume. It smells of, like, look, this is something extremely special, like eau de joaillerie in perfume form. That's number 18. That ambrette muskmallow is in it. It is so beautiful. We have it toned down in here as well, which makes this perfume just feel deliciously spiced, almost a smidge peppery, but delicate. It's never aggressively spicy. Timeless elegance. This perfume was not a huge success in the United States upon its first early 90s launch. However, it was very successful in Europe. And so in Europe, it kept being very popular. I think the whole concept of masculinity, and again, perfume knows no gender in my book. This one, for its time, was very androgynous because it's borderline soft sweet. You know, vanillas for male fragrances were going to dominate the market towards the end of the mid 90s. Later into the 90s, we have the biggest blast being not only a vanilla, but an eau de parfum targeted to men vanilla, which would be Opium pour Homme, launched in the latter first half of the 90s by Yves Saint Laurent. That one was one of the first mass-released, targeted for men, fragrances with an eau de parfum concentration available, not just an eau de toilette. Because up until that point, fragrances targeted to men were either eau de colognes or eau de toilettes. You know, nowadays we have pushed this concept further. Brands want to earn more money, so now they're introducing also like pure perfume, extrait, targeted to men because they want more money. But at a certain point, you know, it kind of loses its allure in a way. Although Egoiste, this is back in the day when Chanel would still be breaking boundaries, when they would still be really the first to initiate a trend. Nowadays, 20 years of Bleu de Chanel, 15 years of Bleu de Chanel, are you kidding me? Like, it's embarrassing. This brand has become embarrassing when it comes to mass release launches. They're amazing still when it comes to their exclusives range. We digress. This was a time when they were still pioneering things, and Egoiste, still to this day, it holds its strength. It is so powerful. There's a subtlety to this. There's a sophistication. There's an elegance. There's a warmth, but then there's an aloofness and a coolness to it. It is so balanced. It is perfectly balanced. It is razor sharp balanced between being edgy, but also being rounded off by the musks and the vanilla. So vanillas became more of an accepted element in perfumery for men, as well as orris root, powdery makeup-y accords. It began with the vanilla and then it developed more and more until in the early 2000s, we have the peak. Now, vanilla in fougere form was already present. This is also one of the reasons why when Egoiste was not that popular in the beginning of the 90s in the United States, Chanel really quickly worked to churn out a flanker, and that would be the fougere version of Egoiste, which is Egoiste Platinum. That's why Egoiste Platinum, which is very rare for Chanel to release a flanker so soon after the main perfume was launched, they released a flanker mostly for the United States market because this one was too ahead of its time for America back then for men. Men felt the need to wear barbershop perfumes. You know, we were still Dracar noiring away. Okay, some people were into Obsession for Men, which is a very barbershop type of perfume. Old Spice is was still a thing in America. Giorgio Beverly Hills for Men. Like, we're talking these heavy hitters. Up until that moment, Chanel's male fragrance bestseller was released in 1981. Anteos, another huge, pompous, masculine, powerhouse perfume. The smell of it was really intense. And this is more tamed, toned down. This is a man that is more coiffed. We're going towards that thing that would become the metrosexual in a way. Now, for Europe, the European man was already into this and was understanding the evolution of perfumery and taking care of oneself and the aesthetic of oneself. In the States, not yet. Hence why the fougere version of this with a ton of lavender was released in the silver package, in the platinum-colored packaging, Egoiste Platinum. Very different to this Egoiste. In fact, this is the one I love. Platinum, I don't wear it ever. Not that I don't like it, it's just this is the one for me. Okay, but I was talking about the early 2000s, the epitome, when the iris and orris root hit. And that's when the whole world, all of a sudden, the men softened up and realized, hold on a minute, the metrosexual has a rivethith. But before I tell you what perfume that was, we also had in the first half of the 90s, Jean-Paul Gaultier releasing Le Male, Francis Kurkdjian's first perfume when he was in his early 20s. That's another fougere lavender bomb. Lavender, but with a ton of muskiness and vanilla in there. And we're pushing this concept of this vanilla, right? Here we don't have that over-the-top, aggressive, mass-release notion like Le Male of perfumery that is like a barbershop but Baroque version of it. I adore Le Male, by the way, the eau de toilette. Again, the eau de toilette. This is way more elegant, sophisticated, nuanced, subtle. This one will be revindicated in the early 2000s, even though it's not about orris root and iris. Nevertheless, early 2000s, Dior with Olivier Polge and Dominique Ropion launches Dior Homme, which the first version with the silver metal little tube inside the bottle where then the sprayer little tubelet is inserted inside the metal tube, like the original Dior Homme. That one was groundbreaking in the early 2000s. Dare I say, one of the last mass-released perfumes by Dior. It was the end of an era, and that one was groundbreaking because the overdose of iris and orris root, it's soft, and it created a perfume for men, and it delivered a concept of a male fragrance that was delicate, subtle. It was a man that was no longer afraid to show his softer side, to show his more vulnerable emotional side. In other words, perfumery was blending more and more into genderless. It's you wear what smells good to you, and you should not be afraid to wear what smells good to you on your skin. So when Dior Homme was released in the early 2000s, together with Dior's first kind of very trending, fashionable, private collection, and this was way before Chanel would release their revamped with magnetic closure Les Exclusives perfumes as eau de toilettes, which were to be released in the late 2000s, 2006/2007. In the early 2000s, Dior launches 3 fragrances. They are colognes, they're unisex, but this is under the guidance of Hedi Slimane, who was back then the director of Dior Homme Fashion. Karl Lagerfeld said he lost all that weight just to be able to fit into Hedi Slimane's Dior Homme skinny look. from Dior Homme. And I remember back then I was in Paris going to Colette, which closed down decades later. They're planning to reopen it. Maybe they've already reopened it, but I remember a time in the early 2000s when Colette was all the rage. So every time I would go to Colette, you would like bump into famous people. I remember bumping into Jude Law one time. Like he's just like shopping there. Colette was like all the rage. To the point where when Chanel would release their collections, and Chanel only sells their clothes and bags and stuff only in their own boutiques, they made exceptions for Colette. Like they would make extra backpacks for Colette. Like Lagerfeld loved Colette. Chanel had collaborations with Colette. So did Dior. So you could find these 3 colognes from the early 2000s only in select Dior boutiques and some exceptionally special department stores such as Colette. I purchased my first Bois d'Argent eau de cologne in Colette. And they had Cologne Blanche, Bois d'Argent, and Eau Noire. Those were the 3 original colognes that were later discontinued and then reintroduced as eau de parfums. But those were also early 2000s. They also had a sophisticated Baroque twist on smell. It was very groundbreaking. Perfumery for men experienced a revolution in the early 2000s. The Y2K era has its big downsides and downturns stylistically, fashion-wise. There was a lot of faux pas, in my opinion, that happened in that era, but perfumery had a moment, and it had a really good moment. And interestingly enough, because of that softening down, whatever was targeted towards men in perfumery, gave Egoiste a revamping, because it just brought it back to the spotlight. It was almost a forgotten gem 10 years after its inception, you know? So it became more and more a classic. You know, once it was 10 years old, it solidified itself as one of Chanel's classics. Now, so we have 1990, so 2000, so 2000, 2010, 20. So it's 35 years old this year, actually. Happy birthday, Egoiste. Egoiste is turning 35 this year. So very, very special. It's been around for 35 years, and I can tell you, it smells of a Baroque softness. It's such a beautiful perfume because even though it's targeted to men, it doesn't say pour homme anywhere, and anybody can wear it if you love this particular combination of that Damascus rose with that sandalwood accord, with that spiciness, the woodsiness in it, and that medicinal flavor. It represents the beginning of Chanel's stylistic early 90s. Karl Lagerfeld took over Chanel in 1983. He first did haute couture and then started with Pret-à-Porter, the collection after his first collection, which was haute couture. And then by the 90s, he had enough time, almost an entire decade. He had, in matter of fact, 7 years to experiment with Chanel. When 1990 hit, the first half of the 90s are the best era of Karl Lagerfeld for Chanel, in my humble opinion. So we have from 1990 to 1996. Those 5 to 6 years are chef's kiss. In that era, this perfume is launched, and it also announces that Baroque flavor for sophisticated pop cultural phenomenons. We see Claudia Schiffer wearing the Barbie Chanel clothes from the, 1993 or 1994 Spring-Summer collection. We have that gorgeous leathery vibe with the Chanel infamous chain sunglasses from the Fall-Winter 1992 collection, where Linda Evangelista is on a motorbike with a tulle dress and a quilted, padded leather jacket and that beautiful, hat with a visor on top of her head with a cigarette in her mouth, which mimics Tom of Finland, but in female Chanel form, because obviously Karl Lagerfeld was as an art collector and as an avid book reader, he knew also Tom of Finland. So there's this beautiful duality and this coquetterie and an interesting flavor between, sexuality, gender fluidity, mixing up genres and a lot of different epochs, even though the 80s were the epitome of that, because the 80s delivered their version of the 40s, their version of the 50s, 60s, and 70s. The 80s were very eclectic. The 90s, kind of the first half of the 90s, pressed it all together in a very sophisticated, elegant bow. They everything was on point. Everything that the 80s were bubbling up to be, the 90s, kind of the first half of the 90s, solidified into a concrete visual that has imprinted itself into my brain and will never leave me. Then the last half of the 90s were kind of already thinking, projecting towards the future, the millennium, and that's a whole other era of the 90s, which I'm not a big fan of. It's okay, but I'm not a big fan of. But Egoiste really falls right in the right time, in the best time for Chanel. Pedro Almodovar is pushing his hyper-colored, pigmented, cinematic aesthetic and poetry in his movies. Again, another epitome of Chanel, because in 1991 he launches the movie, or he releases the movie Tacones Lejanos, which means far away heels, but the international translation is more simplified. They just call the movie High Heels, with Victoria Abril, Marisa Paredes. What a masterpiece. May Marisa Paredes rest in peace, one of my favorite actresses of all time. Her daughter is played by Victoria Abril, Rebecca. Rebecca is wearing Chanel from head to toe in that movie. And we're talking first half of the 90s Chanel. She is wearing the Barbie collection. She is wearing the beautiful pinks, the luscious patent Chanel bags. They were, most of them, the classics, were not double flapped back then. But the lambskin versions, the specific to Chanel saturated red tone lambskin leather. There's a beautiful scene where Rebecca is at the airport waiting for her mother to arrive at a Bajas airport. I don't know, Bajas means sales. What's it called? I think the airport in Madrid. It is Rabaja. I forgot the name of it. So she's waiting for her mom to arrive from Mexico. She's a musician. Rebecca is a television host. She's a news anchor. And she's dressed in Chanel head to toe. A Chanel tailleur. And she has Chanel sunglasses on, the 90s version, the 1991 model. And she has a beautiful red Chanel Timeless Classic single flap bag, which she opens to take something out of the bag. I think her glasses, and there's a huge like close-up shot. Could you imagine being in the cinema, seeing this on the big screen, that close-up of that luscious Chanel red lambskin with gold hardware bag opening up while she's wearing this soft, delicate pink tweed tailleur. That's the time when this perfume was released. It's kind of a revisitation of Baroque. Baroque that we also see in the early 90s in Gianni Versace's collections, with a very specific desire. All of his Baroque prints, the Teatro prints, the Toile de la Mer prints, the Animalier prints, all of that is the first half of the 90s. There's this whole renaissance of Baroque that we experience in the first half of the 90s, and Chanel has to rein it in. Chanel has to do the more subtle version of it. And boy, oh boy, did they deliver their 90s Baroque in Egoiste. Matter of fact, Egoiste is the perfect name for a Baroque perfume of the 90s. It is, and the fact that it comes in this black box, and it has these white outlines and the white text, it's playing with chiaroscuro. Chiaroscuro, which is, in painting, a very specific thing throughout many epochs and art history, but in particular, if we look at chiaroscuro within Baroque, we find the gravitas, the drama, biggest exponent of it being Caravaggio. Not French, he was Italian. Nevertheless, the darkness in his paintings, the characters that are coming out from the darkness, that are maybe lit by just one candlelight, the drama, the contrast of the facial features, the bodily features, the fact that Caravaggio would paint his characters with dirty fingernails, with dirty toenails. He would paint little putties, little angels that have fallen from the sky, and they're on the earth. They're not clean. They got dirty fingernails. They have become humanized. They are fallen angels. They're highly sexualized creatures, and they live in the darkness, not in the light. And they're kind of scared of the light, actually, because the more you illuminate them, the more shocked they get. Caravaggio used to use a specific type of male aesthetic for his as his muses. He loved the boys. And there was one particular type, aesthetic of Italian, mostly Sicilian type of physiognomy and bone structure that he loved to utilize over and over and over again, giving this particular male facial feature characters such as the angel or the Medusa, the decapitated Medusa, or the young boy that's bitten by the lizard, or Il Ramarro. And you can see the shock because a lot of these characters look straight into you through the painting. They look straight into the viewer who's observing them. And in particular, that boy that's bitten by the lizard, you know, I mean, the whole body structure is cramped, right? So it's like turned to the side. I don't remember if it's left or right. The shoulder is up and he's in this position of like scream, and the lizard is hanging off the finger, and that agonizing scream and look straight into the viewer's gaze is just something shocking for back then. Shocking to show so much emotion coming from the darkness into the light and not expecting to visualize something, to experience something so shocking like pain. And surprise, the head of the Medusa is also decapitated with the blood kind of drooling out of her, and all of the snakes are coming out. It's the same facial feature that Caravaggio utilized for many other of his mythological characters. And that's Egoiste revisits all of that. Egoiste is that darkness and that light mixed together. I highly recommend wearing this perfume if you do go to a museum and if you do wish to, you know, see these masterpieces live. It's wearing Egoiste as you go into those places is just on another level. Also, I would highly recommend if you are going to go to visit some Baroque paintings or architecture, another perfume that is really good to do that is Au Noir by Dior, Francis Kurkdjian. The original Cologne concentration, if you can find it, goes for a lot, but they're still producing the Eau de Parfum, no longer green, dark green. Now they took away the color off of it. It's not as intense as it used to be, but hey, better than nothing. Not for nothing, I'm also wearing the outfit today because I wanted that duality of darkness and light, the Baroque contrasts. See, it's a whole vibe. I mean, if Chanel started that Byzantine aesthetic perfume-wise with Coco in the late 80s, and Coco also has a Baroque touch to it, but it's deeper. It is older. It smells more Byzantine, right? Egoiste is Baroque, but also Egoiste is very much Caterina de' Medici. And Egoiste is the perfume that I wore when Virginie Viard did her show during the pandemic. She did her show at the Chateau de Dame, from where Caterina de' Medici used to reside as well. And that place also has a very specific aesthetic and symbology to it, right? Again, very Egoiste. I think this perfume matches everything that is visualized from a more historic context, artistically speaking, architecturally speaking, within Chanel perfumery targeted towards men, because this one is marketed as a male perfume. This is the most Baroque of all of their male offerings. This is the one that has the most, the smell of it is most rooted in art history, really. It really is. This comes from a time that we have lost. I don't believe that Chanel will ever go back to this again. Not in our lifetimes. I mean, one can hope. But this type of experiment, you know, this type of perfume that for a person like me who studied art history, who studied art, who's very much interested in pop culture history, in cinema, in literature, this perfume makes sense. But this perfume is a very specific experiment within this context of art history in particular, that it was the right time, it was the right place to do such an experiment for Chanel. You know, nowadays, nobody's risking something like that. I think they would not release a mass released smell perfume again today like that. I mean, they are playing it so safe. I mean, all they're releasing all the time is, you know, flankers upon flankers of this sad excuse of a perfume. Really, I mean, I've reviewed, you could check out my review of Bleu de Chanel Exclusive. This thing, it's just a money grab machine, in my humble opinion, because, you know, they charge you like $300 for a 100 ml bottle, $277 as of now for a 100 ml bottle. 100 ml bottle, almost $300. And this thing smells so generic, like every other Ambroxan crap out there. This is also 100 ml, except this is $135 currently. Half the price. Half the price of this. And even if this is half the price of this, in my humble opinion, this is light years more elevated and better. This is so sophisticated, elegant, poised, firm. It's a very solid concept. This perfume has a heck of a character. And yeah, $135 currently for the 100 ml in the United States, 100 ml eau de toilette of Egoiste Chanel. That's the full price plus tax, depending which state you're in. In Europe, Egoiste 100 ml currently costs €125 in European countries, in Chanel boutiques and Chanel stores or authorized retailers. And that is as of 2025, right? Second half of 2025. So let's see what the prices are going to be next time I review another batch of Egoiste. The list of ingredients. So I'm going to lift the box so you see them here. There you go. Alcohol, water, perfume, benzyl benzoate, benzyl cinnamate, benzyl salicylate, cinnamol, citral, citronolol, coumarin, eugenol, farsenol, geraniol. There you go. Okay, so your basic structure. They put the minimum that they had to put, allergens and such. Now, if we look at the Chanel website, because they also list ingredients, but they do say, please be aware that ingredients list may change, vary from time to time. Confirm that a Chanel product is suitable for your personal needs, blah, 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 blah. So down here, currently, as of 2025, on the Chanel website, these are the ingredients it lists for us. Sorry about the moiré effect. There you go. We're no longer living in times where something like this is possible. And I think we did it to ourselves. I think we could still go in these special directions if we dared, you know, and if there ever was a fashion house, an haute couture maison, a perfume house like Chanel's perfume house that has been around for over 100 years now, if they're ever, and they're still privately owned, they're not a public company, they're not on the stock market, if there ever was a brand that could dare to invest the money, that could also dare to lose the money, to create art and visions of the future, that's Chanel. If there ever was a fragrance house that could bring us another poetic, artistically historic and beautiful elevated perfume like this one, it's Chanel. And yet, they chose to go with this for 15 years now, reissuing this over and over and over again. I'm not talking about their Les Exclusives range, I'm talking about their mass-released perfumes. They have a different aesthetic. It's a different construction. They're produced in much higher quantities, so obviously it's a different rapport that you have with the raw materials. You know, the way that their Les Exclusives smell, it's not a mass release smell. They're much more focused in a certain direction, like a sommelier of wine. Like you got to really get used to perfume a lot to then start appreciating the Les Exclusives, because they're not as rounded as their mass releases are. You know, they're a little bit more cutting edge, as they should be. But I miss mass-released eau de toilettes from Chanel, not flankers, brand new releases nowadays that just go for it, you know? Not following trends like this thing, but instead creating trends, being the trailblazer, as they used to be. There was a time when they were, and I am hoping and hopeful that there will again come a time when Chanel perfumes, mass-released perfumes, return to their original splendor of being trailblazers. I also have in my collection from way back in the day the soap for Egoiste. There was a soap as well. Yeah, they have the shower gel, they had the lotion, all of it is gone. All they make now is one size bottle, 100 ml, and the deodorant stick. What are you going to do? I'm just glad that they didn't discontinue this one because this is just, it's a masterpiece of a perfume. It just really is. I mean, I hope that, you know, with every updated review that I give of this one, I hope that I manage to add another chapter to the history and the gravitas of this perfume. Because if you check out my prior reviews of it, you know, with every review I do, I add new information and new ideas, new inspirations that the perfume gave me throughout the years. Because the more I get to know the perfume, the more years pass that I'm wearing it, and the more I learn from it. Believe it or not, the perfume also teaches me a lot. It keeps opening new doors. It keeps unlocking new secrets. It's a beautiful relationship to have with perfumes that you love and that you keep repurchasing, you know, from batch code to batch code, from season to season, from year to year, from decade to decade, because they evolve. Whether it be the bottle that you purchased 10 years ago, maybe it's like half full and, you know, it's marinated so beautifully and oxygenated in a way that it is now deepened in smell, and that's beautiful to discover as well. But then it's also interesting to see the fresh smell of a fresh batch today. What are they focusing on? How are they tweaking the formula to make it a little bit more acceptable or more in tune with the times we're living in right now? And for 2025, I can tell you that the smell is very, very clean, spicy, cool, with a smidge of woodsy warmth, but it's not a hot perfume. It's not a warm perfume. It's not a sweet perfume. It is a clinical, medicinal smelling sandalwood with a beautiful, elegant Damascus rose in there. It has those citrusy aldehydic accords in the opening, and then we go in this beautiful, almost kind of melting sandalwood, which on my skin, even like 10 hours later, if I spray it on my chest and it's still on my shirt, I get wafts of this, the most gorgeous dry down possible. I mean, the dry down of Egoiste is like, it's worth waiting for the dry down because this perfume dries down so beautifully. You just want to kind of keep your nose always inside of your skin. You want to eat yourself up. It's beautiful, 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 and very sensual too, might I add. So that was my review of the current batch of Egoiste by Chanel Eau de Toilette, batch code 1303. Let me know if you like this one and what are your thoughts on Egoiste in general down below. Subscribe, thumb up the video, and never give up on fragrant love. Love you loads. Bye.